I'm so scared the whole time.
Yeah, we're going to get started. I'm Chris Canning. I'm with the Rideau Roundtable. And we're pretty happy to be here at Hotel Kenny. Our guest speaker tonight, our guest speakers, excuse me, are Isaac and Max Finkelstein. Isaac is going into grade 8, and he tells me, amongst other things, he likes canoeing. Max has canoed many of the big rivers in Canada. He's canoed up to the Arctic Circle and clear to the Pacific. He set a world record canoeing from Kingston to Ottawa, non-stop. I guess a few years ago. And he's also the co-author of Paddling the Boreal Forest, Rediscovering A.P. Lowe, and author of Canoeing a Continent. And these guys are going to be talking about a canoe trip they took last fall from Ottawa down to Washington, D.C. And also, if anybody's interested, we're Rideau Roundtable will accept any support we can financially for our work involved with Rideau Canal. Parks Canada, we're a non-profit and we're all volunteers. And with that, we'll let Max and Isaac get going. Thank you.
I got the merchandise on. It's really great to be here back in Jones Falls at Hotel Kenny. I've had a very long relationship with Hotel Kenny, starting back in the 70s with Parks Canada. We used to hold workshops here for park interpreters. It goes all the way back to them, and had my honeymoon here, couple of anniversaries here. Wow. So it goes, and now, well, it's now we're doing talks here. So it's great to keep the relationship with Hotel Kenny going. It's been a busy week for paddling. Today, I hope you all know that it's National Paddling Day.
Yeah, I do.
I hope everybody went out for a paddle in celebration of National Paddling Day. We were here early and we paddled with Jim Raffin and a group from here down to Sealy's Bay. Yesterday was Aboriginal Day. A very important day in Canada because I think the Aboriginal voice is the future of Canada. That's just my feeling. And so there's a brigade of canoes from Kitigan-Zibi, which is north of Maniwaki, coming to Victoria Island, and I joined them for the last day of their paddle. So I'm pretty tired today. And earlier in the week was River Heritage Conference in Charlottetown, and before that was Canadian Rivers Day and Rivers to Oceans Week. So June is a very, very busy month with paddling in rivers. So in that theme, this is another paddling story. Now, it's more of a river story than a paddling story. I just introduce it with this little, call it a poem. In the days of my life, I have paddled many waters, and on and on and on we go. I have seen great rivers silver sliding on the tundra, and on and on and on we go. Vast lakes shimmering to the black spruce horizon, and on and on and on we go. Cold, wet, exhausted, hungry, lost and scared, and it hurts from my shoulders to my toes, but on and on and on we go. These waters have carried me to places I've never dreamed of. And I'm going to tell you about one of those places. This is our cue to get, oh, you're great, okay. So this is the story of the capital Canadian Wildlife Federation capital to capital canoe expedition. The symbolism, the Voyager canoe, we took a Voyager canoe, a very traditional Canadian craft. The giant sea serpent is an American eel, which is a creature that's, I'm not sure the exact status of, but certainly the numbers are going way down. I mean, it has an official status on the endangered species list. And I'm sure you don't see too many eels in the Rideau anymore, but when I was a kid there were lots of eels in the Rideau system. Eels don't know any don't recognize international boundaries. They're truly international creatures. They're citizens of the world. And if we want to save the eel and other creatures like them, countries have to work together across international boundaries. So, thanks. Thank you, Isaac. Oh, I have to. They're docked. There's lots of moving in the St. Lawrence, but they're way out in the shipping channel. But some of the wakes were quite. I don't understand wakes from large ships like that. Sometimes they go by and there's not a ripple. Sometimes they go by and the wake's that high. And and you see it coming like a tidal wave, you say, yikes. But we had no close encounters at all, no. And despite the pollution in the harbor, we dug up these beautiful clams. I don't know what the clam fauna, the clam fauna here is not going to be doing so well because of the zebra mussels. Most of the native clams here, they're probably their populations will be way down. What saves these guys is it's so muddy that the zebra mussels can't get a start there. So the native clams are actually doing okay. And it's amazing, as you learn more about clams, a clam workshop would be really good, as well as an algae workshop. Like these clams could be a century and a half old. Like they're incredibly long-lived creatures. And they're real indicators of environmental health, and they also, because they live so long, and I don't know if there's been research done on this, but I can foresee it, that you could have quite a record in some part of the clam of what's been going on over the past century.
Are they edible?
Are they edible?
Or were they edible?
I'm not eating that. 150 years of filtering that water? Wow. Were they edible? I don't, for some reason, there's no, you know about this, Jim? Like, I don't know of any records of native people eating clams around here.
You're saying keep away from freshwater clams, but I don't know why. It's more like just a kind of a thing people say. I've never heard a toxicological reason.
Yeah, and I'm not sure. Maybe people eat clams in the ocean, but freshwater clams, not that I know of. But yeah, because they look like great little morsels of, protein. So you go up the Richelieu River. You guys got to remember that map. You have to have that map stuck in your head. So we're heading up the Richelieu, which is down on the map going south. Chambly Canal's sort of like the Rideau, but only 12 miles long, but similar feel to it, the historical feel. Takes you around a big set of rapids. Thank you again, Parks Canada, for letting us cut into the queue to get into the locks. We're in a hurry though. Can't wait in line. Oh, just joking around at a historic site on the Richelieu, Fort Lennox. So I guess noted, those are three of us from Ottawa. That's me in the middle. The fellow saluting is Clive Doucette. You might have heard of Clive Doucette. He was a councillor in Ottawa for 10 years and ran for mayor the last election. And I didn't know Clive before this trip. We just kind of got in touch by circumstance. And I mentioned this, and he said, I want to go. And I said, well, have you ever paddled a canoe? And he said, well, a couple of times. And that's when I stumbled onto the concept, okay, we'll have to use a big canoe. Because at that point, I was thinking, we had a few little canoes, we can just scoot along. I said, okay, we'll get everybody in a big canoe, and then we'll go. So he came, and that's another fellow from Ottawa, John Horvath. And from Ottawa also was Liz Elton from the Rideau Canoe Club, who's the mother of 2 national paddlers. I actually was hoping her sons would come, but because, boy, they're big guys. And another fellow from Ottawa, Norm Radford. And so the 5 of us who stuck it out, who could, average age 60. And this is physically not an easy thing to do. The paddling was hard. It was an expedition, We tried to put in at least 30 miles a day on good paddling days. And the days were getting short. So my hat's off to those guys from Ottawa, us 60-year-olds. There's the real international boundary, actually paddling across it on the Richelieu. Another British fort built on the wrong side of the border. It's for sale if you want to buy it. I think it's been for sale for like 2 centuries. And then with great optimism we headed out into Lake Champlain. It was very windy. It was very, very windy. The wind gods were not with us. And the wind was straight from the south. Yes, boy, if it had been going the other way, whew, could we have flown down Lake Champlain. However, that's the way canoe trips go. Lucky for us, we got windbound in a really nice place. Let's go on to the next slide. Ile La Motte. Not bad, eh? You know, this is not windbound on some, you know, rain-drenched point of land. This is bed and breakfast. And the guy, he said, well, he's not busy. All his rooms are open. We can stay there as long as we want. And as Clive pointed out, and this guy is actually a Republican. And he's still doing this. There's a picture of the fellow who owns this shaking hands with George Bush. This is a man of some considerable influence. This isn't just one of his homes. So anyhow, we stayed there, as it turned out, for 4 days while the wind just blew. He took us out in his Model A Ford. Well, yeah, it was a nice interlude. And sometimes Lake Champlain is not windy. Notice all the wind turbines though. Should have given us a clue about the wind. And not windy again, coming into Burlington.
Were the turbines on the New York side?
Turbines are on the New York side, none on the Vermont side. Another boundary thing. And finally, with a lot of help from the Lake Champlain Committee, bless their hearts, and the Lake Champlain Boat Museum, who gave us some nice accommodation while we were stuck yet again in the wind, we make it to Whitehall at the end of Lake Champlain. Where, again, and I'm just so totally just blown away by the generosity of people that we met on this trip, especially in the States, but you have to get a bit farther from home. So we cruise in there, and the weather's coming in, it looks really bad. They're closed for the season, but they're just still there closing it down. They said, oh, I'll open up some cabins for you. You guys come in to the restaurant for supper. I'll go, you know, there's some food in the freezer. Really? All this? Yeah. Oh yeah, I think what you're doing is great. I know, it was very, okay, I mean, that's what kept us going. So that's the son of the owner, and well, they're the kids driving us around their little golf carts with their gear and stuff. They were just great. This is the Champlain Canal. It's 60 miles long, heading for the Hudson River. And it has a Rideau-ish aspects to it at the lock stations too. Very pleasant camping. And those lock guys, they were just great. I mean, all the, I guess, in touch by phone, and we'd come up to a lock and the door would just open as we approached, you know. It was just, oh yeah, the big door is opening.
Are they all mechanized?
They're more, yeah, they're mechanized. They're not run like this. I'm not sure how. I guess electrically, hydraulically, whatever. They just had to push a button. But you were with us, and you remember the locks and the dinners in the little town, Fort Edward. We pull into this town called Fort Edward. We're looking for a place to camp. We see some people looking at us over a wall. They look like they've got like feathers and painted faces, and we thought that doesn't look very welcoming. Anyhow, we land anyhow. They've just finished doing a reenactment.
Oh.
We almost could have been part of it. Anyhow, it's the French Indian Wars is what they're reenacting from the 1700s when I guess the British and their native allies would come down and beat up the Americans, and then it would reverse. But that's the biggest part of their history, and then we kind of come, here we come again, you know. But yeah, no, we got, you know, breakfast in the local restaurant. No charge for the Frenchman from Canada, says the owner. And here we are, heading down the Champlain Canal, getting close to the Hudson. Erie Canal, we could have turned right, gone home, but we continued to the Hudson. And there we are, the head of tide. The Hudson River is not so much a river there, it's an estuary, or a fjord. It's a 160-mile long fjord. It's a true fjord, you know, with big high sides, like the Sagami Fjord. It's quite spectacular. Plus there's other things along the way. That's Henry Hudson's ship, a replica. The States is different, yeah. There's another ship coming up here. World War II destroyers. This is all in Albany, which is the capital of New York City. We could have stopped there. Hey, capital to capital, we've done it. Good enough. But no. Oh, we didn't get too many tailwinds, but when you got one, it was nice. Yeah. Yeah, it was a real break to sail on. We're sailing against the tide there, and the tide really runs on the Hudson. But you get a sail up, and you can still make really, really good headway. There you are, Isaac. There's another nice urban campsite at the Boat Museum in Newburgh, where Pete Seeger's boat is going to be on display. Probably by now, it's probably there. They're building the house for it. The one that he sailed up and down. The name has just gone out of my head.
Clearwater.
Clearwater, thank you so much. And there's, you can really see the fjord-like aspect of the Hudson River. Hudson River is absolutely, it was stunningly beautiful. It's got railways on both sides, but don't take away from it. It just realizes what good transportation systems are like in countries that want to use trains, unlike us, and a lot of mansions. Yeah, a lot of incredible mansions. Otherwise, look like the Sagami Fjord. One of the incredible mansions. The man, the owner, I'm assuming, as we paddle by on a really rainy day, walks out onto the deck with a big goblet of wine and a house coat. Remember that? Yeah. And we kind of hope, is he going to invite us in? But he didn't wave, he just looked at us as we bedraggled crew paddled by. Probably because it was the first Voyager canoe he's seen in a long time. We heard on Lake Champlain when we were paddling at night one night, and the next day we heard the story that there's this guy sitting on his deck drinking some beer, and he said, you know, and then he went in, Matilda, there's a, you know, I saw this vision of a Voyager canoe go by. As it turned out, oh no, that was just us. I thought he'd seen a ghost. We were singing too. Yeah, that's the Bloomington Castle. Castle that Rum Running built.
Oh, really?
Yeah, that's just outside of Newburgh. I know, that's an unbelievable structure. You can't imagine what it was like in its glory days. And here we go, we're getting close, we're really getting on there. In the distance there, those two smokestacks, that's Yonkers. Everybody's heard of Yonkers. We all know about New York because we all watch television. So New York's pretty familiar to us. And way in the distance, those towers in the distance, that's Manhattan. But probably about 40 miles. And I remember, I don't know if I took that picture or not, thinking, this is just like paddling into the Rocky Mountains when you see those snow-capped peaks in the distance. And like there's the same sense of anticipation. Wow, New York City, we're actually going to make it to New York City. That's Liz Elton from Rito Canoe Club. And Isaac, stroking the canoe. This is Yonkers, a view from the Yonkers Canoe Club, because the canoe clubs were our friends. And they always put us up and gave us meals and accommodation and entertainment. We actually did presentations at several canoe clubs and environmental groups on the way too. Looks like wilderness, doesn't it? You know, you look at the Palisades on the Hudson River, and cliffs. You know, you'd say, wow, it just looks like you climb those cliffs and walk off into the woods with your backpack, you know, but on the other side is New York City. And there it is. Paddling into New York City was really something. We needed a local guide. This is in the check shirt. Willis Elkins actually met us at Yonkers. took the train, I guess, from downtown. And because it's not an easy place to paddle. You had to get under the railway bridge into the East River, which you could only do at a certain tidal fluctuation, especially our boat's pretty high. So he looked at the tide charts, okay, we can go under the bridge, and then there's a place called Hell Gate, where the tides really race. And you kind of have to time that with, you know, when the tides aren't racing too badly. And then we had to time it with CBC, who was filming us from the UN building. They have an office there. And the guy was on the phone to them. They were saying, you have to go farther out because there's a building in front of us and we can't see. We don't want to go out there. That's where all the big waves are. Anyhow, were you steering? No, I was steering. Oh yeah, you were in the front. Yeah, it was a bit dreamlike paddling into New York City. And there's our favorite urban campsite. This is the North Brooklyn Boat Club. The North Brooklyn Boat Club, stuck between that wall of an old warehouse and the bridge. It's about 25 feet wide, and their boats are in the containers.
Wow.
And I gotta say, the guys running that are gonna change the world. And I actually wrote it. I was so inspired I wrote a poem.
Why do you say that?
I say that because they've got some huge, I can talk over the poem. They're not just a boat club, although they want to get New Yorkers on the water to see the harbor, because you get them on the water and see the harbor, they'll care about it. It's also on a place called Newton Creek. Probably quite a few dead bodies float by there, which was one of the most polluted waters in North America. They're working with several universities. They're monitoring every sewage outfall. They've got a plan to clean up New York Harbor. And these are just a bunch of kids mostly, like young people. And they're really, people are taking notice. Like the universities are getting involved. There is kind of a little celebration when we got there, a celebration of water. And there are a couple of local politicians were there talking about their plans to clean up New York Harbor. And you look across the river, like I say there, the towers of Manhattan, the financial nerve center of the world. And I say, nah, that's not where change is happening. It's over here. You know, in this little, you know, stuck between the bridge and the warehouse. And remember when we came there, remember Isaac? So, we're not sure where we're going, and there's a fireplace, like an outdoor fire ring, and some benches around it, and a pot of stew on the fire, and guys drinking beer, and Isaac says to me, Dad, are these homeless people? I said, I'm not sure, Isaac, I think maybe it's the canoe club, we weren't really sure. And yeah, a bunch of inspiring young people. And one of the guys, Willis Elkins, who I'd been talking to from Ottawa, I got in touch with him because I was just kind of seeking out, you know, boat clubs in New York because you need some help going through New York Harbor in a canoe. And he came up to Yonkers, and he came all the way to Washington with us. He hopped in the canoe and thought this was a fine idea.
Read it for us. You read
Oh.
very beautifully.
But I've never seen waters like those of New York City, caught between fact and fantasy, illusion and reality. But what touched my soul the deepest, a group of young paddlers gathered around a campfire under a bridge in Brooklyn, stew bubbling, a few bottles of beer on the banks of the East River, where dead bodies are always turning up on TV cop shows. Across the river, the towers of Manhattan light the sky, but it is here, beside a crumbling brick warehouse, under a steel bridge, inspiration and renewal emerge from the cracks of New York City. In the days of my life, I have seen many waters, but few that have touched my soul so deeply as the caribou that fill up the world and then disappear, and on and on and on we go.
Your record of going from Kingston to Ottawa, just so happens two of us here are going from Kingston, not quite to Ottawa, but we're curious about how long that took you.
How long do you think it took?
I think
One
it took
day.
3 days. 2 days?
What?
Day?
Get out.
Under 24 hours.
Wow.
What is the guy saying?
22 hours,
Yeah.
22 hours and 13 minutes, and that was over to Gatineau.
Why did they do that?
But I'm not doing, I did that with Joanna Falloon. I don't know if anyone's heard. Joanna Falloon for many years was world champion marathon paddler. And she lived in Merrickville, and she's now living in Ottawa. And so that was a big advantage.
Yes.
Did you protest the law?
Oh yeah, we ran every block. I was just trying to keep up with her all the time.
How heavy was the canoe?
We used 2 canoes.
Oh,
Mostly we used what's called a pro boat, which is a marathon racing canoe. So they're 18.5 feet long, quite skinny, very, very low cut. Probably weighed about 26 pounds. This was in the pre-carbon fiber days, but still not the pre-Kevlar days, so in the Kevlar boat. And then on Big Rideau Lake, we switched to an 18.5 foot, slightly beefier canoe for the bigger water and the bigger wakes there. We had bank runners, we had a crew, so the canoe was just sitting there waiting for us. We just jumped in it and let them take care of everything else. And so yeah, that combination, and then switched back to the racing boat once we're into Lower Rideau Lake.
Good for you. Congratulations.
So we're expecting Isaac to break that.
No pressure.
So I'm gonna have to signal Chris something
Okay.
like that. Okay, what's next? All right, okay, so
I've got that postcard.
you can check the website. The website's got quite a nice blog on it. It really tells the story of the trip. We traveled in a canoe just like that, except not made of birch bark, made of fiberglass, but painted like that. We didn't run any rapids like that because our route took us all the rapids we could bypass them by canals and locks. And Canadian Wildlife Federation stepped forward to be our major sponsor, and thanks. The trip really couldn't have gone ahead without them.
Beautiful paint.
Why did we do this trip? We kind of explained it a little bit, but it's because truly we put all kinds of borders on maps. And this is a picture of the Ottawa River, where that's you, Isaac, Westboro Beach. And on the other side is Quebec. And there's another border that runs down the middle of that river. And that border causes so many problems with taking care of that river. It's nominated as a Canadian Heritage River on the Ontario side only, which makes no sense because we're looking at watersheds here. You can't really protect half a watershed. The regulations differ on both sides. And sometimes they're better on Ontario, sometimes they're better in Quebec. But I mean, you know, nobody can get together to manage the Ottawa River as a watershed because of that boundary. We feel the same thing in the US. I mean, politically, both our countries are really on the downslide when it comes to taking care of the environment and taking care of our waters. And really felt we had to make a statement. And we thought, no better way to make a statement than to paddle a canoe. I've done this before, quite a few long canoe trips to carry a message. Starting back in 1990 when I paddled actually around southern Ontario and came down the Rideau Canal and up the Trent Severn and did a big loop. And at that time I called that my clean water dream. And the dream was, and the dream has been adopted by many folks, which is really good, was that when my son paddled those waters, and he was, you know, just a figment of my imagination, he would be able to eat the fish, swim in the rivers, and even drink the water. That was my dream. Eat the fish, swim in the river, drink the water. And as we paddled other routes like that, it's, you know, in this one, it's still the same dream. You know, it's still the same dream. So we've come a long ways in some ways we haven't. So this is, yes, the kind of bureaucratic slide. Drink, swim, eat message. That's the most important message there. But we also felt there's a lot of NGOs and government agencies, but we're particularly looking at the non-governmental environmental groups who are working to protect rivers. Rideau Roundtable being one, Ottawa Riverkeeper. We tend to work in silos, concerned with their own issues on our own body of water. But as we travel down, I knew this ahead of time, but as we travel down through the states, we realize that everybody's facing the same issues when it comes to taking care of rivers. The details vary, but the main issues are the same. We're dealing with governance issues, we're dealing with long-term transport of pollutant issues, we're dealing with non-point source pollution issues, and the solutions are all the same. We're dealing with too much sewage issues everywhere on the continent. So it seems that we're all dealing with the same issues. We really should be dealing with them in a more collective way. Which means that we must transcend political borders and work together to protect and restore our rivers. We had two very clear goals with this project, and the project's only half done. We're still working on it. The hard work starts now. Paddling's easy, kind of. Well, it's different. We wanted Ottawa, these two national capitals, Ottawa and Washington, to have the cleanest rivers in the world to flow through national capitals. That's a very achievable goal. In fact, we're almost there. Ottawa's almost there just by default, because the Ottawa River comes from the north and all its tributaries are fairly pristine and clean. You got to work hard to mess it up, So, and the Potomac, a few more challenges, but they've come a long ways in the last 40 years. That river is a lot cleaner than it was. It's got a long way to go still to be a really healthy ecosystem, but that is a really achievable goal. Sister River program. And again, that was just to create closer ties between groups, and we started, and hopefully it's going to happen with the Ottawa Riverkeeper, the Potomac Riverkeeper. You guys familiar with the Riverkeeper groups? Probably not. Okay, there's an international organization called Waterkeeper Alliance, started by Robert Kennedy Jr. on the Hudson River, sung about by Pete Seeger, the folk singer who's still singing about it. And it has spread from the Hudson River all around the world. So in the States it was really mostly lawyers looking at the legislation and suing people who were breaking laws, which wasn't hard to do. In Canada, of course, we have a more less litigious approach to taking care of rivers. Anyhow, the Ottawa Riverkeeper is about 8 or 9 Riverkeeper organizations in Canada. Ottawa Riverkeeper being the closest. There's a Lake Ontario Keeper. There's a couple out west, there's a couple out east. So we're trying to get Ottawa Riverkeeper, Potomac Riverkeeper to really have a much closer relationship in their work, and they're talking. The two riverkeepers are quite keen on this idea, and hopefully it would start from there. Folks working up on the Bonnechere River, in Eganville. They're interested in kind of joining up with the Anacostia River folks down in Washington. And again, common issues, and it's just a good way to make ideas cross those borders. And we dedicated the trip, as I dedicate most things, to grandfather William Commanda, who was an Algonquin elder. He passed away almost 2 years ago now. And when I think of ideas like this, we talked about it on the way home from Washington that time, I always kind of think back, would grandfather approve? And I said, grandfather would more than approve of this idea. This is exactly the kind of stuff he was interested in. William Commanda was an amazing man, and his legacy will grow, continue to grow. And he will continue to influence Canada and the city of Ottawa in particular. And I see that happening now. I see it with celebrations like yesterday on Victoria Island and Aboriginal Day celebrations. He's growing larger after his passing than he was before. And He's kind of like William Mandela to me. He's a true spiritual leader. We had a lot of sponsors. The Canadian Wildlife Federation, who has quite deep pockets, is a big environmental organization in Canada, stepped forward to say we like this idea. We want to do more projects like this, so it was kind of a test case for them. They now have, they just finished a project with people rowing across the Atlantic to raise awareness for ocean conservation. They've got a group of athletes cycling across Canada this summer to raise awareness for, I'm not quite sure what, but like environmental issues. They're going to be stopping in towns and giving presentations as they go. So yeah, so this was kind of a new direction for them, but I think it worked fairly well. And then we had all these other folks who helped us in whatever way they could. So how do you get to Washington from Ottawa? Well, you could go past Jones Falls. That was one option. You could go down the Rideau Canal and cross the end of Lake Ontario and the Oswego Canal and the Erie Canal to the Hudson. That's one way to go. But we chose to go down the Ottawa River to Montreal and down the St. Lawrence. I have a pointer. It probably doesn't work either. Probably the battery's dead, like the battery's dead there. Does it work? I see a red light. Oh, there we go. Oh, look at that. Okay, now I can show. Oh, had too many beer.
Where's the cat?
So we started in Ottawa, down the Ottawa to Montreal, turn left a little bit down the St. Lawrence, and then head up the Richelieu, cross the border into Vermont and Lake Champlain, Champlain Canal, takes you to the Hudson River, it takes you all the way to New York City, and then it gets complicated. And then we chose to, because it's the fall, because of the crew, because there's a lot of reasons, you could go down the outer coast like that. Well, more like, well, you could do, oh, that's a bad route. I would do that. But we portaged inland from New York City to the Delaware River, and then down the Delaware to Delaware Bay, which is there's New York City, there's Delaware Bay. Delaware River goes into Delaware Bay, and there's a little canal that gets you to Chesapeake Bay, and then it's just follow the ocean to Washington. The frustrating part is, because Washington's kind of around this long corner, and for the past week of the trip, you could have just got out anywhere and walked to Washington in a day. But it took about 8 days to paddle there. I'm very tired by that time. So, yeah, that's it. You could even go down the Susquehanna River if you were imaginative, but then you had to go through Pennsylvania and Wilkes-Barre, and I thought I didn't want to do that.
Were you camping?
We were camping, yeah, we camped pretty well all the time. We took our own food. I've done quite a bit of sort of what I call road tripping by canoe. And when I first started road tripping by canoe, I said, oh, I don't have to take anything, I just buy food on the way, but I got very, very tired of potato chips and craft dinner quite quickly because there's not many grocery stores that are really close to the water. So we took our own food. We had a friend from Ottawa who drove down twice to replenish our food, so we took it in sort of 2-week portions and bring paddlers to us and take paddlers home, and that was a great help, having that bit of road support. And we'd give him a shopping list too, so he'd come with fresh cheese and maple syrup and stuff like that. So yes, thank you, Bill.
Excuse me, how were there two of you?
Is this a 36-foot canoe?
Oh, that's what my next
Yeah,
question.
so we always tried to keep a crew of 8.
What kind of canoe? Like what was it made of?
Oh, it's fiberglass, and it'll be in a picture fairly soon, I'm hoping.
Okay.
Oh, well, there we go. That kind of canoe.
And there were only two of you?
No, we started off, it's probably 14 people in that boat on day one. We always tried to keep 8 people. A crew of 8 is ideal. 8 to 10 with gear is perfect. If we could unload gear, if there was any opportunities to unload gear, we could put 12 or 14 in. But I didn't always, especially on bigger water, always didn't want to get it too heavy. So yeah, it's a traditional fur trade canoe. Like they use for more than 200 years. And, you know, going from Montreal to the end of Lake Superior. There would have been hundreds of them passing Ottawa in the spring normally. We were just one canoe. That was the limits of my organizational ability, one boat. And there are probably altogether about 25 paddlers rotating in and out. You know, people would join us for a day or two or three, or like Isaac for 3 weeks almost. Just how long could I talk him out of school, you know? We left on September 5th. William Commanda's daughter blessed the paddlers, blessed the canoe, blessed the waters, and it was a very fitting send-off for us. And we paddled, of course. Victoria Island in Ottawa is right across from the Parliament buildings. And William Commanda told me often that for him, and he's kind of a historian, but his history starts about 5,000 years ago. Do you want to say anything, Lisa?
No.
Okay. Just, you know, interrupt me if you do. And Victoria Island in Ottawa has been a spiritual center for Native people for about 5,000 years. People would come from all over Eastern North America to meet there to discuss, well, what's pretty well discussed on Parliament Hill today. How are we going to run this country? How are we going to share resources? And so he said it was no mystery to him that Ottawa was chosen as the capital, because he says it's always been a place of politics, and it was its destiny. And I kind of believe that. Yeah. So, sorry, Kingston, but you just don't cut it. What I am wondering, that was the other, you know, option for Queen Victoria, is Washington's history in that respect. There's quite a bit of geographical similarities. Washington, the Potomac and the Anacostia are two fairly major rivers that come together in Washington. There's a large waterfall just upstream from Washington, sort of like Chaudière Falls. There's some geographical similarities which would lead it to be a place, a meeting place. So I'm wondering what the history of Washington before, you know, it was turned into the capital of the state really was. The Ottawa River is kind of a nice river to paddle down. It's very historical, it's very impressively big. And I find in all these sort of developed rivers, there's an amazing amount of pocket wilderness along them. There's wild rice marshes and, I don't know, there's bald eagle nests, and you find, you're quite surprised at how much wilderness, in quotation marks, finds its home along these very developed rivers. We found that all the way down, even through New Jersey. And we had some really good interactions, starting like on the second morning of the trip when we were in the town of Montebello, and we're camping in the municipal park there. And the mayor of Montebello, that's the guy in this hat, came down to see us with this class, because the mayor of Montebello is also a school teacher. And I thought, this is the kind of interaction we want to have. So he brought his kids down in the morning, and we talked to them why we're doing this. We took them out for a little paddle in the canoe. And these are the intangibles. And you say, you know, who knows? Maybe we change somebody's life. But, you know, you'll never know, but it doesn't matter. And I think those kind of interactions are really, really important. Yeah, okay, you got a lockout here. Beautiful. What's a drop, you know? 12 feet? This is Canoeing on the Ottawa River, 63-foot drop. One drop. So it's so big, it's almost intimidating. Like, you just feel like, wow, this is a really big structure. And there we are below. And of course, all the Parks Canada sites are great camping. So I arranged, or I guess you'd say pre-arranged, campsites for most of the trip, at least down to New York City. After that, things got a bit vaguer. Just to put a framework around things, at least I knew where we could camp. Because finding campsite for a large group on a kind of a rural, urban trip is not an easy, you know, it's not like you're out in the wilderness and just stop and camp almost anywhere. So thank you, Parks Canada. Thank you again, Parks Canada and the Lachine Canal, for being very accommodating, being really good hosts, and setting us up in my second favorite urban campsite ever. where you could walk into Montreal and buy fresh croissants and lattes. And I said, all right, this is a good canoe trip. And this is just scenes paddling through Montreal in the Lachine Canal, which 30 years ago was toxic to touch. You know, if you fell in the Lachine Canal, you're going to the hospital. And now it's all the industry's left, of course, and gone to China and Mexico and Brazil. So the waters are much cleaner, but it was a beautiful look at a city. And how a city, an industrial area, is being redeveloped and revitalized. I thought it was a beautiful example. So all the old factories are being turned into condominiums, but they're keeping the facades, the red brick facades, and lots of parks, bike paths. I thought, wow, Montreal is really doing some really good things here. And often when you go to a city and you don't paddle through it, you don't see stuff like that. Paddling takes you right through the core of the city, right through its historical origins. And so it's a really good way to see a city, see a country. That's the St. Lawrence River, very, very, very low water, not low this year. But so low that boats and marinas were stuck in the mud, couldn't go anywhere. Like water's down 5-6 feet. And we even had trouble getting to shore in places, because you just had these huge mud flats. And hang a right turn up the Richelieu at Sorel, which has to be one of the most industrial polluted harbors I've ever seen. And busy. With hey, I was pointing at the ship, Chris, not to change the slice. Okay. Yeah, and some of these ships are so huge. Like it would take you 10 minutes to paddle by a ship. Like,
How scary was that? That looks very scary.
It wasn't scary because they weren't moving. Some of the folks at the Brooklyn Boat Club and our savior, our guardian angel, the Raritan River Keeper, who when I wrote him from Ottawa, emailed him, said, yeah, I can help you, but can I escort you across New York Harbor? And we said, well, sure. And that's his big red boat, 30-foot boat. And because of that, we got a whole lot of paddlers from the boat club, because they said, oh, can you take all your gear and we can stuff the boat full of paddlers? So he did that. And then he said to me, in a moment of privacy, he said, you Canadians, you're so naive. Did you see a blue line on the map and you think you can paddle it? So it's not like that down here. And we certainly saw why. There's a lot of dangers that we're not accustomed to wilderness paddling. There's ferry boats that are really fast and just you have to know which ones are coming your way and which ones aren't. There's just a lot of traffic. There's areas you're not allowed to paddle through that you don't really know. There's naval reserves and things like that. There's all kinds of reasons not to paddle a non-motorized boat across New York Harbor. But it all went just fine. So that's some of our New York crew heading out on a very rainy day, but luckily not too windy because it's pretty big water in New York Harbor. And that was my fantasy in Ottawa. That's what kept me paddling. I said, I want to paddle a Voyager canoe in front of the Statue of Liberty. Yeah, that was a good moment. And we couldn't get that shot except for Bill Schultz and his big boat out there to take the money pictures. And it was quite a moment. Isaac, you and Mom left. We dropped them off on an island past the Statue of Liberty. How'd you get home?
We took a water taxi, and I think we bus, a train.
Yeah.
We were confused.
Okay. But they didn't get mugged, so that was good. And then we continued down what's called Kilban Kill, which is, Kill is like a strait between Staten Island and the mainland, into New Jersey. You know they joke about New Jersey on TV shows all the time? I now know why. So when you get out of New York and into New Jersey, you start paddling by stuff like that. This post-apocalyptic landscape. And it goes on for like 30 miles. And it's just wrecked ships and wrecked piers and derelict oil refineries. And it is just like, what happened here? It is crazy. And in between these, you get these little pocket salt marshes. There's a little pocket of naturalness, and there'd always be a couple of white egrets there, and terns flying around and stuff like that. And garbage dumps. The main geological feature is garbage dumps. It's like they're huge. Like I thought they were terminal moraines, like glacial moraines. Actually asked them, where did all these big hills come from? They said, the garbage dumps, Max. Oh, I can't. Oh. Anyhow, it's, yeah, we are a bit naive in Canada. We did a portage. You cannot get, there used to be a canal from the Raritan River to the Delaware. It's not passable anymore for the reasons that canals are not passable. They're not used, freeways get built over them, and things like that. So we took, and you saw it in the last slide, loading the canoe onto a trailer and did a portage to the Delaware River. And then we went into a water festival by accident. All those kids in blue shirts, they're having a water festival, and here come the Canadians. Hey, this is opportune. We paddle into Philadelphia, which I didn't even know was on our route. And we didn't know where we were going to stay in Philadelphia. And it's a big city and a tough city. We stopped at a couple of parks just to kind of check them out for camping. And I'm not staying, you know, no way. It just looked, you got the feeling of this is not a good place to be at night. We go right into the center of Philadelphia, Penn's Landing. Wouldn't you know, there's a tall ship festival happening. We come in on a Friday. This festival director comes down, meets us, says, so, do you guys want to be part of the festival? We said, do we get a place to sleep and do we get food? And she said, yep. So we became part of the Tall Ships Festival. We set up a display, we took people out paddling in the harbor, and we had a nice rest, and we slept on the Tall Ship Gazella, the old the last cod schooner on the Grand Banks. There she is, the Gazella. And we mostly slept on the decks, because if you see where people sleep in tall ships, it's like a bat colony. You know, the sleeping quarters go up the side about 5 high. They're about that long. You know, well, I'm not sleeping there. And the best part of that is we recruited people from the Tall Ships Festival to paddle with us, some young sailors. Yay! And the same deal. Okay, we'll take your sailors if you'll take our gear in your big ship, and we'll meet you in Wilmington. So we had young sailors. We headed down out of Philadelphia, past the naval graveyards. The sailors were very impressed. Not only could the canoe go pretty fast, but you get a very different perspective from a canoe, even a big one like that. We had real sailors, so now we could really sail. That's one of our recruits, Kelsey. And we head through the Delaware and Chesapeake Canal, where we had to get special dispensation from the Army Corps of Engineers because no non-motorized vessels are allowed. But we had that ahead of time in Ottawa, but boy, you want to see bureaucracy? It took me 2 months to get permission to go through that. And then I kind of think if you just showed up there, they'd say, oh sure, fine, go ahead. You know? On to Chesapeake Bay, where, for the first time, and not that fish, but it reminds me, we've paddled 800 miles, and we've not been able to eat a fish that entire distance. That's not a good statement of ecological health. This is the first body of water that we could actually eat the fish. And it's the ocean. You know, I mean, there's no ifs and buts. Chesapeake Bay is the ocean. And yeah, and we did eat fish, not that one. You can see they're quite large fish there. But people actually gave us fish to eat, and even gave us fried chicken one night. And we saw some interesting fish, like that guy. Be afraid if they ever get up into the Rideau, a snakehead. Has anybody heard of snakehead? Yes. There's a scary fish. Great big teeth, pretty big, about that long. Like an eel, can go overland at night quite successfully. So, boy, there's no stopping them. Scary. I don't know how far north they'll come, but they're heading north. So be afraid. We had to cross Chesapeake Bay at some point because you pop out on the east side, we have to get to the west side. It's a big bay. It's 10 miles across. So we crossed at this very long bridge. It goes all the way across the bay. Just gave you some kind of sense of security. Not that it could have done anything. We probably picked the windiest day of the trip to cross, as it turned out. But the crew was so gutsy by then. The sailors were singing sea shanties all the way, and we just headed into the waves and bowled our way across. And eventually you get to you keep following the coastline and turn right and you get to Washington. You go up the Potomac and things get quite exciting because you can see the Washington Monument in the distance and you know, you're really going to get there. I never actually thought we'd actually really ever get there. I mean, that's the Potomac Riverkeeper. He was very enthusiastic about the project. I've been talking to him from Ottawa before, and we're still talking about how to do the sister river thing. How to work between governments in two countries. Not an easy thing to do. We're mixing, yes, the waters from the Ottawa into the Potomac, and with the blessing of the Riverkeeper, because ecologically this is not a smart thing to do. But if it's okay with you, it's okay with me. In front of the Lincoln Memorial. Yeah, there we are, in front of the Lincoln Memorial. It was quite an emotional moment. We spread tobaccos on the water and sage that we'd taken all the way from Ottawa. And the only disappointment for me is that the Canadian Embassy took no interest at all. We tried, but they just took no interest. And so there we are. We were met by the folks from the Washington Canoe Club who came out in a big flotilla of canoes and escorted us into their, because we're canoe club people, so we have connections with them. And it's one of the oldest canoe clubs in North America. They met us with a barbecue, with flowers, with champagne. It was really quite a, yeah, it was a really, and people from New York actually came down who didn't paddle. They actually drove to Washington. There's several people who came from New York. So it was pretty good. We thought, well, this is pretty good, but then it got even a little better. As we make it to Capitol Hill, we get invited to the 40th anniversary celebrations of the Clean Water Act. And they said, we want the Canadians there. I don't know what the connection was. It was through Canadian Wildlife Federation and their sister organization, National Wildlife Federation. So we talked about why we did this. We talked about our goals. We really gave this presentation without slides, but it was better because we had real people. And I have to say, the Canadians were kind of the stars of that party. Because there were quite a few congressmen and there was heads of NGOs. And there were sort of, you know, suits, a lot of suits there. You know, and we just had our t-shirts and we were scruffy and messy and we brought our paddles. And yeah, Clive, who's a wonderful public speaker, really moved the audience. And there was many business cards exchanged. And then you go home and everything kind of goes quiet.
When was this?
This was last fall. So we left September 5th and this is October 18th.
My gosh, it's amazing.
So what did we learn? Or what did, I already knew this. What did everybody else learn? I already knew this. I learned this a long time ago. You can't eat too much oatmeal. You're not embarrassed, right? We started off, we had some people on who'd been guides in the Yukon, and they had quite complicated meal expectations, and they planned it all. And in the end, we quite quickly just went to, Clive, will you make us another big pot of oatmeal in the morning? Clive was the oatmeal. He was up early, and we'd make a big hearty pot of oatmeal full of dried fruit and cream, and yes, that's what fueled us. I try and do that every year still, and I think it's a really good idea. It doesn't have to be paddle, it can be anything, but it certainly it just keeps you maybe from being too cynical.
Why do you say it doesn't have to be be paddle? Because I personally think it has to be,
Well,
because of the connection
I,
with the
I
water.
actually, I guess, I kind of do too. Because you go by water, but you could go by foot, you know, into the mountains or into the forest. But you know, to me, water is a more powerful
Me too.
connection. And your mind works different by the water on a long trip than it does hiking, where it's just painful, or bicycling, where it's just kind of logical. But paddling is different. It
Yeah.
does give a different relationship with what's passing in front of you. Okay, I'll go back. Yeah, every year we should paddle somewhere we haven't
Thank
paddled
you.
before.
That's what I think.
I definitely went way outside my comfort zone on this trip. Wow, taking a bunch of people, most of whom had never gone on a canoe trip before, all the way to New York City. Am I crazy? That was definitely way outside my comfort zone. It was for everybody on the trip, and everybody had a transformation. Some people had very large life transformations. I think Clive said it best when about halfway through the trip, and you were interviewing him on on the iPhone, and he said, when I was a politician, I fought so many battles. He said I lost every one of them. And he said, the last one he lost was Ottawa's Lansdowne Park, which left a very deep hole inside Clive. He said, but nobody can take this from me, ever. And I really feel like it really changed him in some ways. It changed other people too. I saw them changing on the trip. There was, and that, the intangibles. Okay, those are more intangibles. Okay, maybe we'll never get a sister river program started. But those other changes, those are good. That made it all worthwhile.
It makes me think that people to people will do far more than politician to politician.
Yeah. Yeah, maybe transcend those political boundaries. Maybe you have to transcend those politicians. Or get more of them in the canoe,
Yeah.
which I keep trying to do. So, Justin Trudeau was going to come with us just for a day, but a day through Montreal. I thought, wonderful, but he didn't, I don't know what happened. It's really hard to get politicians because they're always getting some demand on their time at the last minute. So yeah, we didn't get Justin. And therefore we lost a lot of women paddlers, What's next? Well, yeah, thinking pretty seriously of New Orleans. Maybe not Ottawa to New Orleans, maybe from a lot of places to New Orleans, since a lot of the continent waters go through New Orleans. And so, yeah, 2 years. It would take 2 years to organize that. We're thinking brigades of canoes, like a bigger deal, a different organization. Anyhow, so I was kind of spreading this idea last week at the Rivers Conference in Charlottetown. I got a lot of support, a lot of interest. So, don't have a message yet. I don't know what the cargo in those canoes will be, the ideological cargo, but I'm sure we can tie a message around it. Because the message is really an excuse for me just to go paddling somewhere.
But why does it have to be urban?
Doesn't have to be.
Do you do wilderness?
Well, I've done a lot of wilderness. Well, my heart lies in wilderness canoeing. But when you're traveling with a message, you need people. And although you can do a lot now with the miracles of satellite imagery and stuff, out in the wilderness and send messages back and everything back, I still think, like you say, you need those people-to-people interactions.
But
If
there
you're
would be
really going to
lots
change a life, you have to be there face-to-face.
But wouldn't there be a lot of people who would want to go to the wilderness with you for weeks on end?
Because that's kind of a different.
I would.
Yeah, but it's a lot of people do that, and everybody goes. I'm just thinking, whenever I've gone on a long canoe trip with a message. Like I did I did a whole series of 3 around Ontario with kind of this kind of message. We've got to take better care of our waters. They were fairly urban, rural trips because you get to speak to a lot of people, you go through a lot of communities. You know, it has visibility. I paddled across Canada to the Pacific to try and raise attention to what I consider Canada's greatest historical resource, which is the Voyager route across Canada,
Yeah.
which is kind of being ignored by everybody's, the Trans-Canada Trail gets gazillions of dollars in funding, and here we have this route across Canada that really made Canada, we wouldn't have a Canada without that. And it's kind of fairly unknown and very little traveled. Well, that didn't really work, but there's a book on it. I mean, it's still fairly, a few parties a year travel it, but it's still fairly unknown and no
Have
one
you read
pays
John
much attention
Donaldson's
to it.
book?
Yeah.
Have you read John Donaldson's book?
No, he's from
I'm-
Kingston, isn't he?
Yeah, I met him a
Yes.
couple of weeks ago. I was so excited I could understand it. Really.
Really? Yeah, I should read his book.
Yeah. He
He's
did it
amazing.
solo.
The man's born in 1930,
Yeah.
and he started the trip in when he was 60.
Well, that's
He's just
encouraging.
amazing.
So wilderness trips, for this kind of trip with a message, I guess to me, the urban trips work better. I just want to go off and be by myself or go to the wilderness. In 1967 there was this canoe race across Canada, which we're trying to revive something like that for the sesquicentennial. And so this guy's 10 years old at that time. And he's a little kid on the banks of the Ottawa River. And he told me, he said, I was 10 years old, I'm looking out in the river and I see these bunch of fur trade canoes coming down the river, paddling like stink. And he said, I looked at those canoes, I saw them go out of sight, and he said, it changed his life. He wanted to, not dedicate his life, but that interest in canoes, history, what's around the bend, that never left him. That's the kind of intangibles that things like this leave. It changed his life. He ended up working for Canadian Heritage Rivers program, and river conservation became a big part of his life, and it may not have happened without that vision when he was 10 years old of those canoes coming around the corner.